You know, we grow up with the feeling that life is a sort of moral account book, that somewhere, somehow, there is a balance kept. Do good, and you will be rewarded. Do ill, and the world will, in its own time, find you out. It is an idea we hear whispered in childhood stories, echoed in the warnings of our elders, and it clings to us as a kind of invisible rule. And yet, look closely. There are rogues who prosper and saints who perish in misery. There are those who give nothing but kindness and receive only cruelty in return. I have even heard people cry to God, asking what terrible thing they must have done in some past life to deserve a present life of such pain. And that, I think, is the saddest part, to suffer twice, once from the blow of life, and again from the belief that you must have somehow earned it. We have taken a living idea and turned it into a cosmic bookkeeping system, as though the universe were a merchant, tallying debts and credits. But the world does not work like a market, and the soul is not a ledger. What we call karma, in this popular sense, is only a comforting superstition, not the truth of things. Strictly speaking, the Sanskrit word karma simply means action or activity, from the root kri, to do. It is, in its plainest sense, the fact of doing something. But in popular Indian thinking, it came to bear a more particular meaning, much like the Western idea of causality. It was said that if you fare well in this life, it must be for the good things you have done before. If badly, then for the wrongs you have committed. This was not merely an opinion among many, but the very atmosphere of the culture. It was the unquestioned order of things, as self-evident to them as the rising of the sun. And from this seed grew the vast structure of belief in cause and effect, and the shaping of destiny through one's deeds. In the older traditions of India, whether Hindu, Buddhist, or Jain, karma was woven into a greater vision of the world. It was not only the notion that actions bear fruit, but that these fruits extend beyond the span of a single life. Intentional deeds, it was said, determine the conditions into which one is born again and again, in the endless cycle known as samsara. Thus, the aim of the yogin, the monk or the devout layman, was to act in such a way as to generate no further karma, to bring the wheel of birth and death to a halt. And so liberation, whether called moksha or nirvana, was imagined as the final release from this ceaseless round. For to be free of karma was to be free of the necessity to live again. Most interpreters, both Eastern and Western, have taken this aim quite literally, as if, by certain disciplines of mind and conduct, one could alter the actual machinery of the universe and step forever outside the reach of birth and death. They have imagined that by ceasing to create karma, the chain would be broken and the soul would pass into some unconditioned state. But I suggest something rather different, that what truly happens in the depth of such practice is the discovery that the whole scheme of karma and rebirth is an idea, a pattern of thought, and not a fact imposed upon us from without. Liberation, then, is not an escape from a real bondage, but the awakening from a dream of bondage. The wheel stops turning because it was never moving except in the mind. We must remember that, for those who lived within this ancient vision, it was not a matter of choice. No one sat down to decide whether karma and rebirth were true. These ideas were simply the shape of the world, as certain to them as the firmness of the ground beneath their feet. It was the very air they breathed. In much the same way, medieval Europeans knew that the heavens were made of crystal spheres, or that the earth was flat. Such things were not debated. They were given. And because they were given, to think otherwise was scarcely possible. This is why to awaken from such a view is never a small thing. It is to loosen the very frame through which reality is seen, a frame so ancient and familiar that one hardly notices it is there at all. In our own history, we have seen how certain visions of the world quietly fade. One can never prove that there are no angels in the sky, no throne of gold, no weighing of souls after death. Yet such images, for many, have lost their force. They grow faint, not because they are disproved, but because they no longer fit with the shape of the world as we now see it. For the same reason, the old Indian cosmology, with its intricate laws of karma and rebirth, can come to seem unnecessary. It does not fit the scale, either in measure or in meaning, of the world as it is now understood. And when a story no longer serves to explain, it falls away of its own accord. Thus, as science in the West dissolved Dante's heavens, so in the East, the deeper insight of meditation can dissolve the cosmos of karma. Karma, even within the ancient teaching, can be heard in two different keys. In the common ear, it is the law of cause and effect, one thing following another, as a cart follows the ox. This is the view of events in sequence. A deed here, a result there, stretched out along the thread of time. But there is another way to hear it, not as a chain of causes, but as the simple fact of action itself, in which doing and its consequence are one and the same. It is the way a figure belongs to its background, or a wave to the sea. They are distinct enough to speak of, yet they arise together, inseparable. In this second sense, karma is not something you have or make. It is the pattern of happening itself, here and now. The notion that one event must bring about another is so woven into our thinking that we hardly notice it. We speak of causes and effects as though there were some invisible force driving the world along, a kind of ghostly necessity compelling things to happen. But if we look closely, we find that what we call cause is often only a way of arranging our description. The falling of a tree and the sound it makes are not two separate happenings joined by a mysterious link. They are two ways of speaking about one and the same process. The must we imagine in nature is not in the wood or the wind, but in the habits of our thought. When this ghost is seen for what it is, the chain of necessity becomes less a law of nature and more a pattern in the mind. Consider the simple fact that living beings eat. We often say, they must have food in order to live, as though there were two separate things, life here, food there, joined by some thread of necessity. But in truth, to live is already to be in the act of taking in the world, shaping it into oneself, and being shaped by it in turn. Hunger, too, is not some separate force driving the creature to its meal. It is simply the first taste of eating. And when food is lacking and the body dies, we may say, it died because it had no food. Yet this is only to describe the same event in another way. When we look closely, the word because begins to fade. What we took to be cause and effect is often nothing more than two faces of one happening. When we divide events into cause and effect, we imagine a bridge between them, something by which one is turned into the other. Yet this bridge is never found. How does the lack of food produce death, as if the absence of one thing could push another into being? It is rather that the absence of food is simply the same process as the ending of the organism, described from another side. The same puzzle appears when we speak of mind and body, as if they were two substances, one somehow influencing the other. We create a gap and then are troubled at how it might be crossed. In this way, our explanations often deepen the mystery instead of dissolving it. See this, and the chain of causation begins to look less like a law and more like a habit of dividing what was never a part. Take a stone in your hand and let it fall. We say it drops because of gravity, as if there was some invisible cord pulling it to the ground. But suppose you released it and it floated upward. We would not call it a stone at all, but perhaps a feather or a scrap of paper. For to fall when unsupported is simply part of what we mean by stone. In the same way, a sunflower turns its face to the sun, not because of some command from without, but because that is what it is to be a sunflower. A plant that did otherwise would be another kind of flower. So the must in nature is often not a force at all, but a matter of definition, our way of speaking, about what belongs to the very being of a thing. What we call necessity in nature is, more often than not, a necessity of thought. It belongs to the way we arrange the world in our minds, rather than to the world itself. A stone must fall, a fire must burn. But this must is not a power hidden in matter. It is the rule by which we choose to name things as stones or as fire. Logical necessity is of another kind. If all men are mortal, and Socrates is a man, then Socrates must be mortal. Not because the universe forces it so, but because it is bound in the meaning of the words. So too with many so-called laws of nature. They are the regularities of the patterns by which we see, not the dictates of the world apart from our seeing. Imagine laying a sheet of graph paper over a flowing stream. The water does not know the lines are there, yet we can describe its movement in terms of squares and angles. So it is with the patterns by which we measure the world. Height, breadth, depth, the passing of hours. These are not rods and threads, woven into the fabric of nature. They are the grids we place upon it. When we speak of the laws of nature, we are often speaking of the regularities of our own pattern, not of some hidden machinery in the world itself. Triangles, circles, measures of time. These are our ways of fitting the living movement into a form we can reckon with. The world does not need them to be what it is. It is we who need them to see what we see. So, if we speak of karma at all, let it be not as a ledger of debts and credits, but as the pattern of our being in relation to the whole. You may think of yourself as a kind of instrument, receiving the world and sending it out again in the same breath. Every tone you give forth is shaped by the world that formed you, and every tone you send shapes the world in return. It is not that the universe waits to repay you in kind, but that what you are is the very manner in which the world appears to you. The music you play is the music you hear. The gesture you make is the gesture returned. In this sense, karma is not a law that stands over you. It is the reciprocity of being itself, present in every moment. To see karma in this way is to be free from the weight of an imagined judge. You are no longer bound to the thought that your joys and sorrows are payments from some unseen hand, nor to the fear that your every step is shaping an inescapable fate. The patterns we inherit, whether from the scriptures of the East or the sciences of the West, are not chains upon reality, but shapes in the mind. For karma is not a decree, but the echo of your own song. It is the way the pattern you are meets the pattern of the world, and the two are not separate. Whatever is given forth returns, not as a reward or punishment, but as the shape of the whole meeting itself in you. The kindness you extend is the kindness you live in. The bitterness you send out is the bitterness you dwell among. In this, freedom is not escape from the world, but the knowing that you are moving with it in harmony or in discord, and that the music is yours to play.